Our learning target is to be able to list and explain the political factors that shaped the development of the United States. Lesson 11, Section 2, Washington as President. The most critical problem facing the new government was that the national treasury was empty and the nation had no money. Congress had the power to raise funds through taxes, but its members argued endlessly about what to tax and by how much. In 1791, Congress finally agreed to place an excise tax, or a tax on the production or sale of a product, on whiskey and other luxury goods, such as carriages. The Whiskey Rebellion. Settlers living west of the Appalachian Mountains reacted angrily to the tax. Because Western farmers found it too costly to transport their grain across the mountains to sell in eastern cities, they distilled their bulky wheat into whiskey, which could be shipped more cheaply. Many farmers complained that the tax made their whiskey too expensive, so they refused to pay it. To end these protests, Congress lowered the excise tax in 1793. Most farmers began to pay up, but not the tax rebels of western Pennsylvania. In 1794, these whiskey boys tarred and feathered tax collectors who tried to enforce the law. Alexander Hamilton and George Washington saw the Whiskey Rebellion, which was a revolt by farmers in 1794 against an excise tax on whiskey, as a threat to the authority of the national government. At Hamilton's urging, Washington led 13,000 state militia troops across the mountains to crush the rebels. Faced with overwhelming force, the rebellion ended. Thomas Jefferson thought the idea of sending an army to catch a few tax rebels was foolish. Even worse, he believed, was that Hamilton was prepared to violate people's liberties by using armed force to put down opposition to government policies. The French Revolution. In 1789, the French people rebelled against their king, and Americans became caught up in a debate over the events in France. The leaders of the French Revolution dreamed of building a nation based on liberty, equality, and fraternity, meaning brotherhood. 3 years later, France became a republic and declared a war of all peoples against all kings. Many Americans were thrilled by the French Revolution. This was especially true of Jefferson and his followers, who began calling themselves Democratic Republicans, or simply Republicans. The Republicans saw the French Revolution as part of a great crusade for democracy. In time, news from France caused supporters of the revolution to change their opinion. Cheered on by angry mobs, France's revolutionary government began beheading wealthy nobles, resulting in some 20,000 men, women, and children being killed. Hamilton and his followers, who called themselves Federalists, were appalled by the bloodshed because many of them were wealthy. After hearing about the fate of wealthy families in France, they began to fear for their own safety, wondering whether such terrors could happen in the United States. "Behold France," warned one Federalist, "an open hell in which we see, perhaps, our own future." Washington's farewell address. The growing division between Republicans and Federalists so disturbed Washington that he agreed to run for a second term as president in 1792. He was the only person, Hamilton and Jefferson told him, who could keep the nation together. Near the end of his second term, Washington announced that he would not run again. Before leaving office, the president prepared a message that became known as Washington's Farewell Address. Washington's farewell address was George Washington's parting message to the nation, given in 1796 in which he warned of threats to the nation's future. Washington's farewell address, in which he reminded Americans of all that bound them together as a people. With slight shades of difference, he said, "You have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in a common cause fought and triumphed together." Next, Washington warned of two threats to the nation's future. One of those threats was problems the nation was having with other countries, and the other threat was the spirit of party. Washington said that it was natural for people to hold different opinions, but he warned against the dangers of passionate loyalty to parties. If fighting between parties was not controlled, it could tear the young nation apart. Despite his worries for the future, Washington had much to be proud of as he left office. The new government was up and running, and the nation was growing so fast that it had added 3 new states: Kentucky, Tennessee, and Vermont. Most of all, Washington had steered his government safely through quarrelsome times, leaving the nation united and at peace.